I think that success to me is a sense of personal satisfaction with where you are and where you're going, despite what has happened in the past.
What's the most efficient path to victory against this particular opponent?
He's dropping off for the choke here. We could see the finish. It's looking tight. Tight at Delbra.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Everyday Jiu Jitsu Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kwan, and the Everyday Jiu Jitsu Podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu Jitsu. Today, I have a very special guest with me, Mr. Chris Wojcik. Welcome to the show.
How's it going, man? Happy to be here.
So, Chris, you just got off of a really awesome performance at ADCC. I was actually watching your matches to get prepared for this episode, and you came in fourth place. And how was it being, at the Olympics of grappling and competing under that format?
It was a dream come true. It was also more out of jiu-jitsu than I think I ever expected. I never expected to be competing in front of 15,000 people or whatever the hell, however many people were there. So that was kind of a surreal experience. And also too, just a lot of fun and, really enjoyable. I feel like I got a lot better from it and it was cool.
For sure. And you competed in the under 88 kilogram division, right?
Yes.
What do you usually walk at?
I got on the scale yesterday. I was 193 after eating a bunch of food at night. So probably about 190, something like that. I'm not
Nice.
Small for 88, but I don't think that my game is very size and strength oriented. So I think that for me, I'm a weight that's healthy. And I think that's the best thing for my performance.
Mm-hmm. I tend to agree. When I compete, I prefer to compete at more of my natural weight. I don't usually starve myself or anything. I heard you say in a podcast that you had started originally with more of a wrestling base, but whenever we watch you in competition, you elect to pull guard a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. So how have you made that transition? At what point did you go from being a wrestler to primarily a guard player?
Yeah, so that transition started really early in my jiu-jitsu career. I was a blue belt and I competed in the gi for a long time, and I did the IBJJF, the Pans, the Worlds, and I kind of decided pretty early that I wanted to be a competitor. But one thing that I ran into was I would compete and my opponent would pull guard. So my wrestling background didn't matter because they already pulled guard. And my passing wasn't that good. And, I talked to my coach about it and I was like, yeah, when they pull guard, it's I can't pass. And then I sometimes get swept. I don't know. My base is good, but not I would give up advantages. Even if I wouldn't give up points, I would still lose. And so my coach was like, you can either become a world-class passer or you just pull guard. And I was like, obviously I want to be a good passer as well, but pulling guard was the short-term solution, to dealing with guys pulling guard. So I started pulling guard and sweeping to get on top. And then, passing when you're winning by 2 points is a lot different than passing when it's, neutral. And from there, it just kind of spiraled from, okay, now I'm not just pulling guard to get points for competition. I'm pulling guard because I want to be in guard. And I found that my natural attributes, which are flexibility and hip flexibility, leg mobility, and stuff like this. This kind of was this was natural for me. And so I started just becoming a guard player, and wrestling became something that I just had in my back pocket in case I needed it. And, I'm not the best wrestler in my division, but I'm, most people are, now they expect me to play guard. They think I'm a guard player. I have a DVD called Don't Stand Up, my game is very guard oriented, but I wrestle every day in the gym, so I'm my goal is to be well-rounded, and pulling guard, being a guard player is part of being well-rounded.
In a jiu-jitsu match, do you feel more comfortable pulling guard, or do you feel more comfortable standing and being on top?
It really depends on the opponent. I generally like, like at ADCC, I had a match with Jay. We just did a breakdown of it yesterday. And against Jay, because he's like a fucking like state, I believe Jay won state in wrestling. I didn't win state. I was like a good high school wrestler. I wasn't like remarkable or anything. So against someone like that, I would prefer to be playing guard. Against someone who's maybe like super big or super good at passing, I would probably prefer to be on top. But I generally feel like my guard is now at the level where I can kind of be safe against anybody.
Mm-hmm. Do you play other sports aside from grappling or any
I mean, I
other
grew
physical?
up playing soccer. I wrestled. I was actually this is dumb, but I was on an internationally ranked wiffle ball team when I was in high school. Um,
Like
like
I'm
like
obviously American football.
uh, I
Or do you mean
never played
soccer?
football. Yeah, yeah, soccer. I never played. I
I
played
forget
football.
you're born in England, right? So you call it football.
Yeah, no, I played soccer. I played American football for. That's actually how I got into combat sports. Was I played American football. I was undersized. I wasn't really tough. I sat on the bench for the whole season, and my mom was like, I hear a lot of people. She heard from someone that their kids were doing wrestling to get better for football. There's always that like thing that's like in America. It's like you play football, you should wrestle in the winter so you can like get tougher, get stronger for next year. And I did that. And then I was like, this is way better because I wasn't very big. And wrestling, I got to go against people my size. And it was like more like technique and, strategy. And so I kind of fell in love with wrestling. And then wrestling became jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm. So you played American football for 1 year.
So I played for 1 year, didn't play very much. Second year, I came back and I hated it even more. I was like, I never got in the game. I was like a smaller kid. I wasn't like a natural, like, good athlete. I was like kind of dorky. And I was like small, not kind of fat, like just not like, I didn't get to play much, and so I didn't really enjoy it. And wrestling, there was a lot more opportunities to compete, opportunities to kind of like just get in better shape. And I found that was way better. So I did 2 seasons of American football and then went straight into wrestling. And then I played wrestling and I was a soccer goalkeeper for a couple of years in high school, 3 years in high school. And then by the end of probably about halfway through high school, I was like, I'm a wrestler. That's the sport that I'm choosing.
I had a similar experience with football. I played for 1 year. I was the smallest guy out there. And this was back before, we were thinking too much about like CTE and things like that. And we're just fucking, I'm running into giant dudes who at my age, like are way bigger than most kids. These guys are like 6'3". Like one guy on my team was like 260. And we're in practice just running into each other. I'm getting smoked every time. I'm actually shocked I didn't sustain like serious injury. And I feel very glad that the next season I'm Canadian, right? Now, next season I went into hockey instead of football and I kind of gave up football because it was ridiculous, but I did have fun and it was like a pretty good learning experience in terms of becoming tough because there were times I remember I wanted to quit so bad and my mom was like, no, you've committed to it. Like you have to finish the season or whatever. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, that was good that she made me do that. But man, like football's crazy. Like you could absolutely just destroy your knee or, break something super easily. And this is full contact. And like, like you had mentioned, like I'm one of the smaller guys out there. And it's just like, I don't know, you just try and do what you can in the scrum, right?
I had a similar experience in wrestling to what you were saying about like your mom made you stick with it. When I
Mhm.
started wrestling, we would do these like just these terrible workouts, and I was like not in very good shape. I was like, and when you start wrestling, you fucking suck, So I would just get thrown around every day. I would get pinned all the time. It was like I was not fun, and I was like, this sport is not enjoyable. It took me like I felt like I enjoyed the like I would go home and I would be like wrestling my sister and like wrestling with a dog and like I loved doing wrestling, but I hated being so bad at wrestling. And every time I
Mm.
started a season, I wanted to quit for like the first 3 years. And my mom was always like, no, you started the season, you can quit, but you have to finish the season first. And every
Yeah.
year I'd get to the end of the season, I'd be like, all right, one more year. And I would do one more year, and then eventually it was just like an integral part of like who I was. And so I just stuck with it.
And so when did you transition from wrestling to jiu-jitsu?
So I wrestled through high school, and like I said, I was okay. I wrestled like I made. I wrestled in Illinois, so Illinois is a pretty tough state in America for wrestling. And I was decent in Illinois, which meant like I went to college in Oregon, and I would go wrestle at the club in Oregon, and like I would like beat up the guy who took second at state in Oregon. But like in Illinois, the guys who go to state in Illinois end up wrestling in the NCAA championships. And that in Illinois, I was like, And so I finished my last season, and I was like, I have no desire to even try to wrestle in college. I could have probably wrestled for like a D3 school if I wanted to go that route. But I was more like, I want to do something else. And my mom knew a guy who owned a martial arts gym, and he was like, oh, your son wrestles. He should come try, jiu-jitsu, or he did boxing and jiu-jitsu. And so I went and did my mom got me a private, and we did 30 minutes of jiu-jitsu, 30 minutes of striking. And that was like my first time. That was about a month after wrestling ended, and it was fun. And I was like, okay, I'll try some classes. And so I did some classes with this guy. And it's funny because he was a brown belt at the time, and he ended up selling the gym, and my original coach Jeff came in. So the guy who I took my first classes from, he was a brown belt, and he's still a brown belt. He doesn't really train anymore. And my coach Jeff, he came in about 4 months into my training, and I wasn't training very much. I was a high school kid. I was going maybe twice a week, maybe once a week, if I wanted to, if the schedule worked out or whatever. And then I think I really got serious about 6 months. So I started in April. I got real serious about 8 months in. So about January of the next year, it was kind of like a New Year's plan. I was like, this year I want to like really work on jiu-jitsu. And so I wanted to do MMA, and I was like, I'm going to really work on jiu-jitsu this year. And then really working on jiu-jitsu this year came just, I want to only do jiu-jitsu.
Is MMA still something that interests you? Yeah. At what point, because you had mentioned at first that you were like, you would train in the gi a lot, you do IBJJF competitions and things like that. You're completely done in the gi now? You're not interested at all?
I mean, things would have to kind of change, I feel like, for me to go back to the gi. Like, there would have to be some opportunities that are worth it, because like at this point, like the kind of matches and competition opportunities that I have in no-gi are like, it's like, I had the opportunity to compete at ADCC, had the opportunity to compete at Grapple Fest and big international shows. So like to go back to doing like the Chicago Open in the gi would be like, it would be hard for me to get excited about that the way that I would get excited about the stuff that I have in no-gi. And I don't enjoy it. Like, for me, it's like I'm better at no-gi. I enjoy no-gi. I like the gi. Like, I talk shit about the gi because people get really mad about it, and it drives engagement and like posts and stuff. But like, I like training in the gi. It's fun. I used to train in the gi every single day for years. But I think that just in terms of like my competitive career right now, everything looks like no-gi for the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm. In terms of ADCC, so when you were preparing for that competition, like what was your mindset in the training room? Like what were some of the things that you were focusing on specifically for that competition and that rule set?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I had a pretty bad back injury in early June, and I missed the first month of the training camp. So the first month of the training camp, and like probably the first couple weeks into the second month, my main goal was to not get injured, because I was like, if I'm healthy, I'm one of the best grapplers in this division. If I'm not healthy, I'm going to lose first round. So that the big thing was like being healthy. And I spent a lot of time doing recovery work, focusing on core strength, managing my training load. And then after that, I think the big goals were working on wrestling, obviously, for ADCC, but for me, if you want to be like super specific about things that I was working on, I was trying to avoid settling in bad positions and taking bad shots. Because for me, I have like very good, like, a lot of people talk about like my turtle escapes and front headlock escapes and back escapes. I'm really good at getting out of bad positions, but the goal was not to like put myself into the bad position so much. And I think that this was really helpful especially in the quarterfinal match against Charles Negromonte. I think that I had so many attacks on him and I never really got put in a bad spot. And that was kind of why I was able to advance through that match. And even in the match with Jay, like I was taking a lot of risks and I was able to kind of like stay offensive. And that kind of made the match a lot closer than if I hadn't been working on that throughout the camp.
How do you feel about like because we have ADCC coming to Vancouver? There's an open that's coming in like 2 months, and I'm planning on being there. And I have a bunch of students who are planning on competing. And one thing that I've noticed with that rule set, it's not like IBJJF where if you get a good entry on a shot and you put them down, it's like you get paid for it. You get an advantage, and now you're on the board, right? And there's this whole like catch up game going on with IBJJF with all the advantages. Whereas in ADCC, as we all know, it's quite difficult to score, right? And I've always found that when I'm wrestling in ADCC competitions, like I'm timid to get into those shots. Like you said, you try not to take these bad shots, even though you have good turtle defense, good front headlock defense. What I'm noticing is, especially after watching the last ADCC in person and seeing a lot of where the fight was taking place, is it's like a lot of these guys aren't afraid to take a bad shot or to even get like to even let somebody get in on their hips, because once somebody shoots, it's almost like the wrestling begins from there. It's almost like, if you hit a beautiful double and put someone down to their butt, it's only just beginning now. Like now you actually have to hold them down from there. And so what I'm trying to do is prioritize like the scrimmaging and the like getting them down, and then what happens after someone gets in on a shot, as opposed to like, setting up the perfect shot or getting the perfect takedown, something that would score in IBJJF or wrestling. In ADCC, there could be a huge exchange where you burn lots of energy, but you actually get nothing for it. And then, you stand up and you're like kind of defeated in sometimes because you've exerted so much and you've gotten nothing for it. And now you're expected to do it again. So like my camp, a lot of it has primarily focused on like those scrambles and those gritty situations, where it's a near score and they're trying to wrestle up and scramble out. Like, do you think that after being at ADCC, do you think that that's like a viable strategy or a focus in training to get ready for an ADCC competition?
Yeah. So my personal process is different from what I would tell people. So like when I'm training, because I train at B Team, and in the room, pretty much always we're working on like ADCC rules every single day. So we don't have to say, hey, we're going to wrestle ADCC rules today. That is like kind of understood. Mm-hmm. That being said, I like my first trials that I did really well in, I was training pretty much only with hobbyists who do like masters IBJJF sometimes. That was like my training camp. And so I think that I've trained with people of like so many different levels. And I think that as an athlete, the way that you are going to train for something like ADCC, if you don't have so I wouldn't say don't do what I do where I just wrestle and I know the rules. I would say work on like specific situations that force you to work on this, like what you're talking about, the what happens after the connection, because most of us do a lot of wrestling and a lot of hand fighting, like when we train normally. But with ADCC, you need to work on like what you're talking about, the like what happens once you get the connection. And Gordon talked about it on, I think it was Rogan or like some podcast years ago. He talked about, they call it hustle till you score. And basically like you need to have the ability to, pace yourself in a way that when the connection happens, that's when you go hard. You're going like, maybe like the shot, the hand fighting is a little looser, but the second that the connection happens, that's when the hustle starts.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I really worked on. And the way we worked on that when I was training it with my coach, Jeff, back in Chicago, is we would do ADCC rules rounds starting in a lock double, or starting in a sprawled single leg, or front headlock, or, turtle, or stuff like that. And that's actually probably how I got really good with the turtle escapes, was I just, I learned to use it as a guard. I'm thinking about doing a bottom turtle instructional, and they were like, call it armadillo guard because of Texas. But doing being able to move from those positions where you're already connected is key to developing the skill of understanding ADCC rules.
You know that turtle is Steve's favorite position, right?
Oh, he's told me many times.
Except he literally does nothing. He just shells there and actually doesn't really do jiu-jitsu. So you did lose in that would have been the was it the bronze medal match against Felipe Costa?
Yes.
So in that match, looking back, if you could, because it was actually kind of heartbreaking. I think you got scored on in the last 30 seconds of that match, right? Not to force you to relive that trauma or anything.
It's okay. It's
but
all right.
what would you have done? Would you have if you could, hindsight's 2020, if you could go back and play a different game or adopt a different strategy, knowing what you know now and how he played, would you have changed anything?
So, going back into that match, so the part that broke my heart was I popped his foot. I broke his foot with a ankle lock in that match. Mm-hmm. And
he was grimacing, and I think he was kind of making some noises there when I watched the tape back.
Yeah. It went pop, 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 pop. It popped 5 times. And I was after the third pop, I was fuck, he's not going to tap to this.
Yeah.
He's going to eat it. And I was and then in my head,
shitty feeling.
I'm oh, well, you know what? But I had this kind of funny realization. It's funny what you think during a match. I was oh, well, it is the bronze medal at ADCC. He probably is not going to tap to a foot lock. So I probably would have just trusted my wrestling a little bit more in that situation, because I felt like I was a better wrestler than Felipe Costa, but I put myself in a position where I played guard the whole time. I broke his leg, and then I kind of blew my load, and then I was on bottom, So in hindsight, I should have stood up. That's what I would have done. And if I lose because I stood up there, that's fine. And even I don't think about losses. I don't, it kind of bugged me for a couple of weeks, but at this point I'm okay, well, can't really change the past, But in hindsight, I would have trusted my wrestling a little bit more, especially I was so dead set on trying to submit him. I should have been a little bit more patient, I think.
Mm-hmm. How do you address an opponent who just constantly tries to avoid jiu-jitsu and avoid engagements? Someone who's just kind of let's say you're playing guard, and we all know the guy where you're trying to get connection and they just try to focus on not letting you get connection. So maybe you'll get sloppy, or you'll do something that you wouldn't normally do out of frustration because you're trying to make something happen, but they're doing just enough to not get penalized. How do you to address that player?
So that was pretty much exactly what happened in the Negromonte match. I couldn't get in on him. I was chasing him. He was circling. He was good. He was tactical. And instead of backing up, he was working around me. And so I was engaging, and he was disengaging, but disengaging offensively. So you can't penalize him for disengaging by he does this kind of hip switch pass really well. And so I was watching out for that. But also too, I was I'm not going to just I like to be able to just pull guard and do leg locks. That's I'm better than most people when that's how the fight goes. But on him, I was having a really hard time getting in. And so I really just upped the work rate. And I think it was a 15-minute match. I probably had a million initiations. I just I kept shooting single legs. I kept shooting double legs. I tried foot sweeps. I was really offensive. And I think that is the best way to deal with a kind of cagey opponent, because in ADCC rules, and most of when I think about these things, it comes back to ADCC rules. And if he's like stalling and it's sub only, it's a little bit different. But like, I was thinking like, okay, I'm going to outwork this guy. I'm going to get way more initiations than him. And if one of these attacks works, that's going to be enough for me to win. And in the end, what happened was I got in on a calf slicer at the end, and I think that was what won the decision at the end. But also too, like I had been attacking the entire match.
Mm-hmm. As a leg locker, how much do you prioritize calf slicers in the leg lock hierarchy? Because I love leg locks too, and for me, I'm not a huge fan of slicers. There's a couple of positions where I like that submission, but sometimes I actually find it kind of dangerous to the person applying the slicer. Like if the person's in like a sprinter's position, like they're on their knees, and now you're like doing the classic slicer where you're hugging the hips and you're like pushing down on the back of their knee, but your leg is sideways. Like I've seen people blow out their knee doing it this way, because I guess the other person has the ability to just like donkey kick their leg, and all that pressure is going sideways in your knee. So for me, I look at the slicer and I'm like, I like that move in like a truck position where they're on their back facing belly up. But we saw Joseph Chan get caught by a slicer. I don't even know if you want to call that a calf slicer. I guess it is, or a knee compression against Barboza. And like, do you actively look for slicers when you're attacking legs, or is that a move that you're kind of like, it's not going to work against most people?
I think so. I've hit that slicer that Barboza hit in competition. I've tapped a lot of guys in the room with it.
I know it as like the Sean Roberts slicer, if you know who Sean Roberts is.
It's funny, like, so my coach, Jeff, he taught it to me, but we learned it as the knee separator, like not a calf slicer, There is pressure, obviously, in the calf and the hamstring and stuff, but when done well, and this is what happened to Joseph, it pops the patella.
I heard a pop in the video.
Yeah, luckily he's okay, but it's a very dangerous leg lock. Also, too, Barboza is he's
a beast.
He's a physical specimen. Now
he's huge for under 80.
Yeah, he's massive. I mean, he's big for 88. He's done 99. But I think that most people, like, it's not the highest percentage leg lock. I'm going to be honest with you. I've hit it in competition. It's awesome. It works. I can tap really good people with it, but at the same time, you have to really get it perfect, or you have to be like a freak of nature, which I am not. And so what I'll do is, and I use this versus Negromonte, I got in on a similar slicer, but not quite as deep. And so I use it to enter other leg entanglements or to sweep. So it's more of like a guard, if that makes sense. It's like calf slicer guard. And it's a good like kind of tactic. But that being said, it's really low on the totem pole of like my favorite leg locks.
Yeah.
Like it works. It's something good to have. I like it a little bit because not a lot of people use it. So it's like kind of unexpected, but like it is not, I don't think it's the highest percentage leg lock.
So are you guys throwing that move around at the B team before? Like, because when I saw that happen live, I was like, holy shit, like Barboza just did something that I don't think anybody saw coming, especially we all know how good Joseph Chan is, right?
Okay.
And when he threw that lock on, like he did it really nice from the top. It was super surprising. And Joseph kind of like hesitated for a sec. And then he did what I think a lot of leg lockers do when they're caught in a leg entanglement, which is they start separating the feet and they start looking to extract their knee. But the problem with that move is it's like their forearm is like a bar underneath their knee. So it's like you can separate their feet, but you're still locked in the submission. And meanwhile, this guy is locking and he's falling back hard. And of course, Barboza is massive. So he's got this size advantage. It's like, do you think Joseph should have instead reached for the head and trying to prevent extension? Like, what should he have done to escape that move? Did he do the right thing by trying to address the legs and untangle?
So that's definitely, you want to definitely untangle the legs. The only thing that I would have maybe, and I don't remember if Joseph did this, but going foot to foot is kind of the best way to relieve the pressure. So
Like kick your
connecting
own leg straight?
so your leg is bent, but one thing
Yeah.
that if it gets heel, so when I teach the move, I always say get your heel to your opponent, get their heel to your butt, and that's gonna make your leg bent. Like if this is your leg, your leg is gonna be like this, then it's gonna pop. That's like a diagram of what happens, basically. But when this happens, what we need to do is if we go foot to foot, so like if we go foot to foot, like here, like your leg is coming from the outside, then now that's going to make it more difficult for the knee to compress like this, right? Because your leg is going to stay here, and maybe you can even extend it and get it back to kind of like a safe position. And so super late stage, it can be tough.
Yeah, that was locked on too.
Yeah, and also too, I think that the entry that Barboza, like, I've watched a lot of Lucas Barboza matches. I've never seen him go for a flying calf slicer from the top.
Never.
I think that Joseph might have just been a little caught off guard.
Yeah.
I think it was a really unexpected strategy.
How do you feel about the current, well, it's not current because we're past the events now, but like all the ADCC politics leading up to, I mean, it's funny. I remember when Craig announced that CJI was coming, and I was like, man, I don't know if that's going to be good for the sport because it's during ADCC weekend. This is almost like our Super Bowl, right? This is like a sacred time. And it felt like he was taking away from that by putting like an obstacle in the way, something that was going to disrupt the event for everyone. But as we got closer and closer, and, Craig did that podcast with Stuart Cooper, where Stuart was venting like some of the things ADCC was doing. And of course, ADCC blocked me because I made like a very minor comment on one of their posts. So they just like, boom, blocked me. And then I had other people messaging me being like, yeah, they blocked me too. And all this shit. And I'm like, man, like these guys are actually kind of bitches. Like they're very much, if you criticize them in any way, they'll just like prevent you from doing it and trying to create this echo chamber. And then we saw things like obviously the pettiness with like Gabby Garcia not getting inducted into the Hall of Fame and things like that, even though she was supposed to be inducted, and she chooses to compete at CJI and associate herself with that event this year. And it's just little things like that. Like, how do you feel about the politics of ADCC and like moving forward with CJI, really setting the tone for paid athletes now, and really kind of pulling pulling the wool over our eyes here, with what ADCC has done for not paying athletes? Like, politically speaking, how is ADCC going to recover from this? Because I don't think that ADCC has improved their image this year. Honestly, I feel like after the last two events, everyone was super pumped for ADCC and Jiu-Jitsu grew, but I feel like this event, it's almost had the opposite effect in the shadow of CJI.
So I think that ADCC ADCC treated me well. They paid all the athletes, they paid your travel, they paid show money this time. The prize money is not what it is for CJI. And I do think that the fact that the prize money hasn't changed at all as the sport has grown is something that I wish was not the case, right? Some of the political things, I think that it's just martial arts and egos and things like that. It's like, we see this in the UFC, we see it in, MMA, boxing. It's very common for the people at the top of these organizations to get pissed at each other. And I felt like even with CJI, like some of the things that I felt like Craig did, I didn't agree with. Some of the things that Mo did, I didn't agree with. I think that what Craig did really well was, putting on, like, he gave the athletes what the athletes needed. He put on a great event. I thought ADCC was a really, great event as well. I think that both events, and also too, I think that as much as the two events hate each other, I think the winner is the sport. Like ADCC CJI weekend, I don't know if we'll ever have one like that again. Say even if the sport, like, even if Craig says the next ADCC, his next CJI will be the same weekend as the next ADCC. Even if that happens and he's like just going to do this to keep the troll going, it's not going to be like the first one. It'll be like kind of predictable. Like the first one where it's like, oh my God, all these athletes who we thought were going to ADCC are pulling out. And then like, it's great for me too, because I got in because a couple guys dropped out. So like, I think that it's just really good for the sport, and I think that that's kind of the best part. The political stuff, I try to stay out of that because, I don't really want to like care too much about what anybody's doing. But I definitely, I wish that it was more about promoting the sport than like petty arguments between both promoters,
So I know you were busy at ADCC that weekend, but did you have a chance to go to the Thomas and Mack Arena and watch any CJI in person?
No, the scheduling was terrible because ADCC, we had to do our weigh-ins and rules meeting Friday night. And then like we got out by like 7 or 8. And then it's like, okay, I got to go to sleep because tomorrow's a big day. And then Saturday was kind of the same thing. Like if I had lost at my first match at ADCC, I might have, figured out a way to get into CJI. But like I got it maybe too. So I was like, I got to just go, get some food, rest. I had to wash my gear because I didn't bring enough fucking clothes. And so like, it was just kind of the whole weekend. I watched most of it on my phone, like at dinner and even backstage, but like didn't make it over there, unfortunately. But the pictures look really cool.
What was the biggest upset of the weekend? This is a hard question because there were many upsets.
Pixley versus Meregali, I think, is the biggest upset.
Yeah. That was such a, like, Meregali is a world-class guard player, and he chose to stand with Michael Pixley, and stand up is Pixley's like best position, right? Like, do you think that was just an ego move? Like Meregali was just like, no, like I'm going to show that I can put anyone down, and once I get on top, I'm going to dominate them.
So I think that it happened like 7 minutes into the match. I think Meregali may have been getting frustrated. That's kind of what I think, because I think he was probably like, oh, this guy's a purple belt from Pedigo. I'm gonna sub him really easy. And then 7 minutes in, he hasn't gotten anything going. He may have started to get frustrated, and that might have led to him coming up. I think he came up on a wrestle up and then just got launched, and that was when he ended up getting submitted.
One of my buddies told me that Michael Pixley, like if you watch Michael Pixley's top game in the tournament, it was pretty annoying. Like he was kind of avoiding engagements a lot of the time. He was hesitant to like when he was fighting like Lovato, I saw him play a pretty timid game, and like he was kind of being that guy that disengages, right? Like he did what he had to do to win, and I'm not blaming him for that or anything. But I heard from a buddy that when Pixley was a wrestler, I don't know if he won state or what his wrestling accomplishments are exactly, but I think he did really good without like taking a single shot. Like he's not someone who will shoot in on the legs. And I think he did very, very well, primarily just with the use of like standing, upper body ties, like overhooks and underhooks. So Meregali kind of played right into his game, because Meregali, when we've seen his stand-up renaissance as of late, it's been mostly things like arm drags, underhooks, body locks. Like he doesn't shoot, you know what I mean? He likes to stand up tall and kind of play judo style takedown. So I feel that he kind of played right into Pixley's, game. And when he landed, he fucking got that. I knew right away when I saw that landing. Like I've separated my shoulder in a similar fashion before, and like I knew right away, like this is, that when that Darce was on, it's like there's no way that he would just not fight out of that Darce unless he was like really badly injured. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
I've trained with Pixley once.
You trained with him once?
Once, yeah. I used to train when I lived in Chicago. I used to train with Dante a lot in Ohio, and one weekend I was there. The Pedigo guys, Couch and Pixley and a few others came out, and Pixley was like he might have still been a white belt or like a brand new blue belt or something. He wasn't like, he hadn't done trials yet, but they told me like, oh yeah, this guy's like a really good wrestler. And I was like, okay, well then I'm going to try to wrestle him because I want to, see what it's like. And I got fucking washed.
Mm-hmm.
And
Was it with the same thing, like overhooks, Uchimatas type?
yeah,
Type
so
game?
Pixley, he taught me how to do like the slide by that I do. I learned from Pixley. I think that he's got some of the best upper body wrestling out there, especially definitely in jiu-jitsu, but he's had like, I think he's had Fargo champ, he's a Juco champ, D2 champ, like really good, really accomplished wrestler. And good guy too. I spent a little bit of time with him, but I think that like stylistically, I think it was a bad match for Meregali because I didn't see the whole match. I just saw the finish because I was backstage. And I think one of our guys was going around the same time as well. I think Declan was competing at the same time. But it was like hard to like, Pixie made it difficult, seems to have made it like if he's playing that cagey game, Meregali is, what's interesting about Meregali is like his wrestling is effective, but it's kind of awkward. And I think that he hasn't had a match with a high level wrestler. Like he beat up Wagner, he's beat up a lot of really good guys, but like none of them are like world class wrestlers. So that was like an interesting test for him.
With all the shit that he talked leading up to that match, about how he was basically going to blow through everyone, he was going to smash Kynan in the finals and all this stuff. Like when you start making statements like that, do you think that mid-match that can mentally start to affect your decisions? Because like he was getting frustrated and he was probably thinking like, fuck, I should be winning. Like I told everyone I was going to win. Now I got to do something to try and force that win. He's looking past his entire division. I mean, to be honest, he kind of has the right to do that just because what he's accomplished in jiu-jitsu and who he is. But like at the same time, do you, I believe that when you start making statements like that, it can actually work against you if things aren't going your way. Do you think that maybe affected his judgment or, changed, maybe forced him to do things that tactically weren't the smartest?
It's definitely a possibility. Like for me, I'm not that kind of competitor who is just like blindly confident. Like when I look at my opponent, I'm like, oh fuck, this guy's good. Like
me too. I'm the same way.
I'm not like, it doesn't come naturally to me. Like confidence in competition is something that I've had to work at for a really long time. So I couldn't fathom being at ADCC and being like, oh yeah, I'm gonna kill everybody. I'm like, this is gonna be really hard,
Yeah.
And so, and like most of like my friends who are like ADCC level athletes are like the same. I think that Meregali's mindset is more uncommon, and I can only imagine, like, when I try to be cocky, like, as a joke, my performance does not get better, So, but that's just me.
Mm-hmm. So just before we wrap up the topic of upsets, I mean, we should mention some of the other upsets. I actually think the biggest upset all weekend is probably Kennard defeating Victor Hugo.
Oh,
yeah.
I was thinking ADCC, but you're right.
That was fucking insane. I even think Barboza catching Joseph with that move is a huge upset. But the other one that sticks out in my mind is Dante subbing Mika Galvao with an ankle lock. I mean, that was absolutely insane. Mm-hmm. But do you think that I don't know if you saw the match, but do you think that PJ should have gotten the nod against Mika?
So I didn't watch that match, unfortunately. I think that when I think about upsets, definitely the biggest one, you're right, is the Lucas Kennard. I actually have a win over Lucas Kennard from like 2 years ago. That's like, I'm like that. It's aged really well.
Yeah.
That dude is really good. He's like,
did you leg lock him?
I leg locked him. Yeah. This was in the gi. That's how long ago this was. It was.
So basically, by jiu-jitsu math, you're better than Victor Hugo then.
Yeah, and Victor Hugo beat Nicky Rod. So who's the real $1 million man, right?
I don't think anybody saw Kennard beating Victor Hugo, like just because of who Victor Hugo is. I think everybody thought it was going to be Hugo and Nicky Rod in the finals.
You know what's funny is Declan, who's one of our guys from Australia, he was telling me, he's like, I don't know, man, I think that's a bad match for Hugo. And I'm like, yeah, bro, okay, but Hugo's huge. And then like the fucking backstep heel hook happened, and he was the one. He's like, I told you guys. He's from Australia, so he's trained with Kennard a lot.
Yeah.
But nobody else really expected that, which I think is just amazing. And this guy, I think he had like 800 followers before the weekend, and then now like he's like got the biggest win of his career. It's really cool.
Super cool. What are a few tips that you could give out for becoming a better competitor?
Mm-hmm. So I think that the biggest thing is that you have to train hard, but like you have to really train hard. Like for me, like when I feel like I think of a competition like a test in school, like you have to study for the test. Otherwise you're going to feel like this anxiety about the test. Right. And I think that like when we compete, a lot of people like they train, but they don't train in a way that eliminates their anxiety. And I think that there is a way to prepare for a competition that is going to help you kind of find like this peace in like within yourself before you go out there. And I think that you want to go out on the mat when you compete feeling like you've done, maybe not everything, but everything that you can. You've done the best within the limits of your capability. So that would be one thing. Another thing that I would say is really learn the rules of whatever organization or event you're doing, because I think that there are so many competitors who make silly mistakes because they haven't learned the like nuances of the rule set that they're competing in. And then I think the last one is try to kind of simulate the like competition environment or try to simulate the training environment in competition. So like when I go to a competition, like I try to get a good warm up because when I train, my best roll of the day is never the first one,
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people. So like I try to make sure I'm warmed up. Like I had my first round, like Taylor Pearman, luckily we were on opposite sides of the bracket. I warmed up with him for the whole tournament. We were like I felt super fresh when I went out against Hinger. And then I think that's really important. And then like some people like to blast music and like whatever, get super amped. And I like to listen to music before I compete, but like once it's like probably like 20-30 minutes before the match, I take the headphones off and I'm like fully present because that's what I do when I train, so I try to recreate the training environment that I'm in every day when I step out to compete. It'd be like 3 tips there.
Is there a way to train in a fashion that will allow you to completely eliminate your nerves and anxiety before competition?
No, but there is a way, like you can significantly reduce it. Like before ADCC, before this year's trials, I had really good camps where I did the whole camp. I worked as hard as I possibly could. I was prepared. And then I've done matches where I train like 3 days, like if I'm doing like 2 competitions back to back weekends, I'll train like 2 or 3 days. The second one, I always feel a little underprepared because I haven't really trained. So like, and the same thing can be said, like, if I did like if I'll do like, I'm doing a gi tournament, but I've been training mostly no gi, so I'm not really prepared. Or like I've been, I know I've been slacking off and choosing easier partners or not doing the specific rounds that I need to be doing. So you can never completely eliminate your nerves, but there is definitely a way to train that can help you find like, maybe not a complete removal of nerves, but you can remove that little voice in your head that says, oh, I should have done this. I should have done that. I should have done whatever. Like before ADCC, I was like, I dealt with a back injury. I got my back better. I still trained really hard for a month. I did everything that I could given the circumstances that I was, dealt. And I felt like the only anxiety that I felt was the natural adrenaline that you feel whenever you do something kind of, scary. So I think that there is a way to train, but it's usually a bit more than people think.
Mm-hmm. How do you like to warm up?
Honestly, I just like to roll. I like to do like, that's like the best thing. Sometimes it sucks because you do like, when I was doing like local competitions, there's no mats and it's crowded and there's not really a whole lot. And running is not the same as grappling. So like what I'll do is I do like, if I don't have access to a warm-up mat, I like to do like hand fighting, like with a partner, like physical wrestling, just eliminate the shooting where you're getting your lungs pumping, you're forcing your muscles to work. See, the last thing that you want is to go onto the mat like tight. So I'll do some form of grappling, whether it's hand fighting. If I have a mat, I'm doing like full rolling, not 100% intensity, but like, 50, 70%, something like this.
Hmm. Do you have let's talk leg locks before we get out of here. So I
Mhm.
wanted, obviously there's this move that's come out. It's being known as the Woj Lock.
Mhm.
And I saw it from a couple of reels that Kieran Kachuk posted, and he was
Mhm.
hitting them in competition, and then he credited you. And I'm like, oh fuck, I gotta check this move out. And then I started playing with the position. It's essentially like an ankle lock variation from 50-50 that kind of functions like a toe hold in terms of at least my interpretation of the move is that. Now I wanted to pick your brain on it because I could be missing some big things, but I have started to hit them in competition, not in competition. That would be a dream. In training.
Uh-huh.
And it's a really weird move because normally I don't really hold ankle locks from 50-50 with a lot of weight. Like I don't really I know they can be done, and if you get the foot in the right position, it can be very powerful, but for the most part, my ankle locks are like Aioki's. They're outside straight ankle locks generally, right? But this one is very, very interesting because you're attacking the entangled leg, the inside leg on 50-50. Um, can you sort of run us through that move? Tell me how you like, did you discover that move or did you see it somewhere else?
So I learned it from my original coach, Jeff Serafin in Chicago. And I started doing it. So actually, that's what I subbed Lucas Kennard with a few years ago in the gi, because it's like it functions like a toe hold or an esteem lock.
Yeah.
Essentially, you're in 50-50, and anytime your partner's toes are pointed away from your body, you
Yeah.
can very easily expose the. I always say heel on the nipple is like the cue to make sure you have a good bite, and then
It's
you do
almost
like a
like they're
little.
hiding it, like they're turning like they would naturally to hide themselves from an inside heel hook, correct?
Yep. So the dilemma that I play is I go. Now I'm calling it the Woj Lock because that's what everyone's calling it. But I learned it as a reverse Aioki lock. So now I'm calling the regular Aioki lock just a reverse Woj Lock. Um,
Reverse Woj Lock. That's awesome.
so like I think that like it function it plays really nicely into like the modern 50-50 game because
Hmm.
everybody wants to avoid the inside heel hook, the inside spin. And if you watch my match with Hinger, I was going for this Woj Lock and I wasn't quite able to get enough of a bite on the ankle to get the finish. But when he felt the pressure and he kind of overcompensated with his foot, and that gave me the inside heel hook when he posted the other way. So it
Hmm.
kind of is like a new way to play 50-50, but it's not like a new technique. Like I didn't invent it. I wasn't even the best at like when I go home to Chicago, I'm not even the best at it in the training room. Like Jeff is the one who taught it to me. He's like really good with it. I started using it, and then when I came down to B team, it's a little bit bigger platform. I started hitting it on pretty much everybody in the training room. I've gotten at least once. And then Kieran was the guy who he started playing with it too, and he managed to hit it in competition. Shortly after, and he's a nice enough guy to give me some credit on that. He could have called it the Chuck Lock if he wanted to, but it's cool that it's becoming like a new thing and more people are using it. I'm getting sent videos of like people I don't know using it, so it's cool. Um, and it's like definitely one of my most kind of successful techniques from 50-50.
Yeah, it's just so cool to have another option from 50-50 aside from the inside heel hook. Like I noticed right away uh when after I saw that reel from Kieran, I took it to the gym and I just grabbed one of my buddies who I drill with and I'm like, "Hey man, like let me just play with your foot a little bit. Let me just see if I can get to this position." And generally, if you have that ankle lock, estima lock position, if their knee is still turning in, nothing happens. In fact, they might even be able to like keep turning and just avoid the move altogether. But I found what really worked, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, but like it's kind of you have the foot like the heel is in almost center chest, like you kind of want that side toe hold type shape with the foot, and then at the same time your knees are shearing to the outside. So it's like like if their knee can turn in, I find it relieves the lock. But if you can tilt your knees toward the outside and at the same time do like a side crunch where you're bringing your elbow to your hip, that's the shearing force that allows, essentially like it's like a toe hold or an estima. Am I off base with those mechanics? Is that kind of what you do?
So the only thing that I would add, and I have a video on Instagram of this from like a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, like when I first moved to B teams, like last summer. And basically what I would add is if your partner is like bending their knee to like kind of rotate with the lock, then I would just go for like a belly down reverse Aioki or Woj Lock or whatever. So
would you turn to the inside?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Okay.
you can continue to finish when you rotate internally. And if they go back, you're just on your back, and that's kind of the best way to finish it.
Cool. With that move, the one thing that I find difficult, and I've started to show it to a couple of my students who like at our gym, we really like leg locks are like a pretty core part of our system. We use them a lot. And the same thing the issues that I've had, other people have echoed those issues, which is basically like if they're in 50-50 and they're kicking their leg straight and their foot is past your body, getting somebody who's kicking their leg straight to get their foot to slide from the side of your body to the center of your chest can be difficult. And I've played with a couple of different ways of doing this. Like I've used my forearm on their toes to sort of bend at the end of the lever and force almost like, how you're setting up that, Eddie Cummings called it a python. I think it's similar to like the bolt cutter, what Bodoni did to Owen O'Flanagan, where you're kind of like pushing the toes in. That I found has created a bend in the leg and allowed me to bring the heel to the center of the chest. But do you have like a favorite method that you like to use to enter that Woj Lock position?
Yes, I have. So generally, like when I have a hard time getting it, it's usually on big guys because their leg is just too big to like get the bend. So I have two. Like literally, this was like invented for Heisem because I couldn't Woj Lock Heisem because his leg was too long. So I would sometimes do exactly what you're saying. The bolt cutter. I learned it as the razor lock. Whatever. It's got a million names like that toe hold.
Mm-hmm.
And I will do that. And sometimes they'll bend the knee to relieve pressure. Another thing that I do is I lock my 50-50 below the knee line. And I'll go.
I saw Kieran finish the move without the knee line. And I was like, how the fuck is he doing that without the guy spinning out?
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll go 50-50 below the knee line and I'll keep a straight ankle lock grip. And then you can break a shin, just by locking your 50-50 low and just pulling in just for like a normal straight foot lock grip.
Would you do that belly down as a finish?
I like to do it on my side. You could do it belly down as well. But when I do that, once you lock belly down, if the guy respects the break on the low fit, I call it baby 50-50 because it's like a small 50-50, but someone else called it someone else had a good name for it too, but like a low 50-50. If they respect that, they're going to actually pull you back into regular 50-50 with their knee bent. And so that will get me back to where I want to be.
While you're setting up and finishing the move, how important, do you need your feet crossed or can you do it with open feet? Can you just stomp the hip? Can you move your legs into different positions?
Many different leg configurations. You can do it with feet crossed and generally find it hard to do with a triangle.
Yeah, I've been using crossed feet and then extending my legs straight. I find actually quite powerful, and then tilting my knees to the outside to push the knee while I'm sort of like initiating that side crunch. Do you finish it often without legs locked at all?
So one that Jason Rao does that I kind of stolen from him is he goes like a butterfly hook with the outside leg in the 50-50, the non-entangled leg. And you can finish it just like that. My favorite way to finish it, though, is feet cross. That's how I hit it in competition. That's what I use mostly in the training room. I feel like it's hard to escape. I need to just hold the leg long enough to break it. And I feel like that's the best one for me.
I've always found feet crossed, I've had more success. I I feel like it's more powerful. Okay, just quickly moving along here. Do you think that'll be part of everybody's game at some point? Like, do you think that'll just become part of everyone's leg lock? The current meta of leg locks, and like you'll need to know that move.
That would be sick, wouldn't it? I think that it's definitely going to keep becoming more popular as it gets hit more. It's like
it's legal in the gi too, right?
Yeah, it is legal in the gi, and it's worse, I think, in the gi because of the friction. Like when I hit it at Brown Belt Worlds, it was like I've never felt an ankle pop as much as that one did. It was like just terrible. And I think that the friction makes it worse. It's really good. We'll probably see it more in the gi, probably until they like make it illegal or something. They always do with anything that works. But I think that also too in no gi, it's gonna make the inside heel hook game kind of different. And I think that it could change things. And I think that would be really cool to see.
Yeah, and I think like just it's such a great dilemma with the heel hooks, and because everybody knows you want the heel hook, now it'll just give you something else to do, right? When your opponent, it's actually pretty easy, I find, to defend heel hooks from 50-50. It's just now we have that double threat. There's another thing that you can go to. You had mentioned in a podcast that your least favorite move was the smother. Is that correct?
Yes. My least favorite move to do and to have done to me.
Well, that's fair. Why don't you like doing it? Do you think that it's valid?
It is valid. I just think it's cheap. Like for me, I'm kind of a savant. I like the arm triangle that is like perfectly executed where my partner is tapping because it wasn't a crank, it was a pure choke. That's like my favorite submission. And the smother is just like the ugly stepsister of that.
Mm-hmm. I like the arm triangle. It's easily one of my favorite moves too, because I've really recently started loving top pins more than like back attacks. Like I prefer mount to the back now. Maybe it's just because I'm getting older. I don't know. And like I find with arm triangle, it's just so available, like when you're walking arms over the head, if you're going to go for like an S mount or a mounted triangle, like you have to transition your controls from your arms to your legs. And that's so fucking hard against somebody who's good. Like I think an S mount armbar, if you can do that to someone at a high level, that's like incredibly impressive, because it takes so much precise wedging and control. But the arm triangle is just right there. But I love the smother because it's like, a lot of the time it just forces the bottom player to create defensive hand reactions. And now, it's very difficult for them to do like their hip and knee elbow escape or whatever, so I love the validity of it. It just in terms of getting a reaction. I don't get a whole lot of smothers. I agree. It's not the classiest thing to do. What about roadhouses? Do you play with those?
What is a roadhouse?
Commonly known as the the grape choke. The Vader choke. Literally, you're just throat fucking the guy with your hand.
Like a rape choke.
Exactly. Yes. Do you play with that? Like my coach Rob Bernacki, he calls it the roadhouse. So a lot of people, but most people know it as the rape choke, right?
Oh yeah. Okay. I mean, I don't do them. Like I said, I try. Like for me, I'm at the point where like I want my jiu-jitsu to be pretty, and so I don't do a lot of dirty shit. Like I'll sometimes do a little smother because I can't get the arm triangle and I'm frustrated, or I'll like use it to set up the arm triangle. But like I don't really do like a whole lot of like stuff that's like not like I have this like expression of jiu-jitsu in my head that I'm working for, and usually like the smothers and the rape chokes and all that stuff don't fit into that. Now in competition where it's like how much depends on how much you're paying me, right? If it's money on the line and winning and stuff like that, then anything goes. But like when I'm training, I try to like keep it pretty.
Mm-hmm. What's the most dangerous move in jiu-jitsu?
I think probably the Z lock. I think because it's Z-lock and outside heel hook, I think, are the two that in competition.
Outside heel hook. Interesting.
If you look at the nastiest breaks, it's always the outside heel hook. like the leg breaks are always outside heel hooks. I think Z-Lock, most people like anything where you're attacking the hip, anything above the knee, that's like, that can lead to really devastating consequences. The calf slicer actually that we talked about earlier, that can be pretty dangerous as well because people don't respect it. And if they're not aware, they'll think it's like a pain compliance when it's, literally going to break the leg. And maybe now that it's been hit at a, world-class tournament, that might change and people might become more aware of it. But I think that the most dangerous moves in jiu-jitsu are always the ones that are like lead to devastating breaks and are not respected. So like twisting hip locks, where people are like, oh, I don't feel it. And then something snaps. Or like the calf slicer where it's like, oh, it hurts a little, but I'm being tough. And then my leg snaps. And then also too, like anytime there's a nasty leg break, it's an outside heel hook.
What's your favorite part of jiu-jitsu?
I've thought about this a lot after ADCC because I like had this kind of like existential crisis where I'm like, what the fuck do I do now? I've been working towards this goal for like 5 years. And I think that for me, my favorite part about jiu-jitsu is like this kind of personal development aspect that is like maybe a little cliche, but I think that like for me, jiu-jitsu forces me to like kind of be the best version of myself. It forces me to like, I have to be like a good coach. I have to be like, disciplined with my diet. I have to be disciplined with every aspect of my life. And I think that goes beyond just competing. Just like being around jiu-jitsu makes me be the best version of myself.
Least favorite part? Injuries?
Probably injuries. Sometimes I would say that my least favorite part can be like how much it matters to me. Like when shit goes bad,
Interesting.
I get like devastated, Sometimes I'm like, I wish I was just a little bit more like, okay.
Outside of jiu-jitsu, what's your favorite thing to do?
Writing.
Cool. Last question. What is success to you?
Interesting question. I think that success to me is a sense of personal satisfaction with where you are and where you're going, despite what has happened in the past.
Very interesting answer. I've never heard that before. Some people say money, some people say freedom or happiness. I don't know.
I mean, those things are all good, but I think that if you are like, maybe you're not going to be ecstatic all the time when you're doing anything. And I think that like, if you have goals that are worth working toward and you are also like content, not, with where you are now, maybe not content, maybe content's not the right word, but like you're okay to be where you're at and you are looking forward to the future. Those are kind of,
Awesome, man. Well, thank you very much for your time, Chris Wojcik. Is there anything you want to talk about? Any products you want to push? Social media? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I'm Chris M. Wojcik. I'm also the Grappler's Diary on Instagram. Two things, I'll send you the links for these two. My newsletter is the Grappler's Diary. It's like a weekly Substack that comes out. That's kind of some of the writing that I do. And then also too, we talked about a lot of guard stuff and leg lock stuff today. If anyone wants to learn some of my guard stuff, I have an instructional on BJJ Fanatics called Don't Stand Up. And that's really it.
Awesome. I really appreciate your time, Chris. It was a great chat. And guys, if you want to support the show, check out the links in the bottom. If you have any questions for me, you can email me. Again, links in the bottom. Check out my online academy. That really helps support the show. There's other ways to donate in the links at the bottom. Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate you coming out and talking to me.
Thank you. You're great.
All right, guys, take care. The Everyday Jiu-Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about jiu-jitsu. Bye-bye.